My name is Maya Chen. I'm 27 years old. I wish you were never born. My father said that at my own birthday dinner in front of 38 people. The candles on the cake were still burning. Nobody moved. Nobody said a single word. My stepmother nodded like he'd just confirmed tomorrow's weather. My half-sister pointed her phone at my face and kept recording. That was 4 months ago. Since then, I haven't raised my voice. I haven't cried in front of anyone. But I did something that made my father call me 19 times in one night. And by the 20th call, his voice wasn't angry anymore. It was begging. If you connect with this story, hit that subscribe button. Drop a comment with where you're watching from. Now let me take you back to 3 days before my birthday, the night I discovered what the party was really for. I need you to understand something about the Chen family before any of this makes sense. My father, Richard Chen, is 56. Broad shoulders, commanding voice, the kind of man who walks into a room and expects everyone to rearrange themselves around him. For as long as I can remember, he was the center of every holiday table, every family gathering, every decision. No one questioned Richard. Not once. My mother, Sarah, died when I was 8. Complications after surgery. Something that went wrong months after she had me. I didn't understand it then. I barely understand it now. But what I understood early, what I felt in every silence, every skipped bedtime story, every look my father gave me when he thought I wasn't watching, was this: he blamed me. He never said it out loud. Not back then. He didn't need to. It lived in the things he didn't do. He didn't come to my school plays. He didn't hang my drawings on the fridge. When I got the flu in 4th grade, it was my grandmother, Grace, who drove 45 minutes to pick me up. Not him. Grace was my father's mother. She was the only person in that house who made me feel like I had a right to exist. She called me my darling girl. She came to every single recital. She died 2 years ago, and some days I still reach for my phone to call her. After my mother passed, my father remarried. Diane Miller became Diane Chen. She brought Amber, her daughter from a previous marriage. Amber was 4 years younger than me, blonde, loud, and instantly, permanently the favorite. I was moved to the smallest room upstairs. My mother's photos came down, Diane's went up. And that was just the beginning. 4 years ago, my father lost his job at a supply chain management company. Downsizing, they said. He never looked for another one. I was already working as a registered nurse at Valley Regional Hospital. 12-hour shifts, night rotations, the kind of tired that sits behind your eyes and doesn't leave. When the first mortgage notice came, Richard left it on the kitchen counter without a word. Diane mentioned it at dinner like she was commenting on the weather. Someone should probably handle that, she said. She looked at me. So I handled it. The mortgage, the electric, the water, the property tax, the homeowner's insurance. $2,600 a month straight from my paycheck. I set up autopay so I wouldn't have to think about it. I told myself it was temporary. Richard would find work. Things would balance out. They didn't. Instead, Diane got comfortable. She discovered my credit card had a supplementary card, one she'd somehow talked Richard into authorizing. I'd see charges I didn't make. A $290 coat for Amber. Shoes. A handbag. Then an $1,100 designer bag charged 3 weeks before my birthday. When I brought it up, Richard shut me down in 4 words. She's your sister, Maya. She wasn't. But I stopped correcting him years ago. What kept me quiet was a promise. Grace, in her last weeks, held my hand and said, "Keep this family together, my darling girl. They'll fall apart without you." I believed her. I thought if I just kept paying, kept showing up, kept being the responsible one, eventually they'd see me. Eventually my father would look at me and see something other than the daughter who cost him his wife. I was wrong. But that $1,100 bag? That was the first crack. 3 nights before my birthday, I came home from a double shift at 1 in the morning. The house was supposed to be dark. It wasn't. Light bled from under the kitchen door, and I could hear voices. Low, deliberate, the kind people use when they don't want to be overheard. I stopped on the stairs. Held my breath. Diane's voice came first, clear as glass. "We announce it at her birthday. 40 people. If she says no in front of everyone, she looks selfish. If she says yes, problem solved." My father's voice, slower, "And if she makes a scene?" A pause. "Then Diane, then you do what you should have done years ago. Cut her off." I pressed my back against the wall. My scrubs were still damp from work. My hands were shaking. Not from cold. They were talking about my savings. $48,000. 6 years of overtime, holiday shifts, skipped vacations. Every dollar I had that wasn't already draining into their mortgage and their electricity and Diane's credit card charges. Amber was engaged. I didn't even know until that moment. And they wanted my money to pay for her wedding. Not asked. Wanted. Planned. Choreographed down to the audience. "She owes this family," Diane said. Her voice had no hesitation. "It's time to collect." I backed up the stairs, one step at a time. My heart was slamming so hard I was certain they could hear it. They didn't. I sat on my bed in that tiny room for 2 hours. I didn't cry. I stared at the ceiling and thought about every payment, every silent dinner, every time I swallowed the word no because I was afraid of what would happen if I said it. Something shifted that night. I didn't know what yet. But it was already moving. The next morning, I sat in my car in the hospital parking lot and made a phone call I'd been putting off for 2 years. Rebecca Morrison, 63, estate attorney, my grandmother's closest friend for 3 decades. Grace had mentioned her name exactly once in her final days, in a voice so quiet I almost missed it. "If you ever need to understand what I've left behind," Grace had whispered, "call Rebecca." I'd written the number on the back of a grocery receipt and tucked it into my wallet. It stayed there, untouched through Grace's funeral, through 2 years of bills and silence and a house that never felt like mine. Rebecca picked up on the second ring. "Maya Chen," she said, like she'd been expecting me. "Your grandmother told me you'd call eventually." "I need to know what she left," I said. "I think I need to know now." "Come to my office. There are things your grandmother wanted you to know when you were ready." She paused. "Are you ready?" "I think so." "Then I'll have everything prepared." I scheduled the appointment for the following week, after the birthday dinner. Whatever was coming, I needed to get through Saturday first. That afternoon, Amber found me in the kitchen. She held up her left hand, wiggling a diamond ring I'd never seen before. "You're going to help with my wedding, right?" She smiled. "Dad says you have some savings." I looked at the ring. I looked at her face. She wasn't being cruel. She genuinely believed I existed to fund her life. That was worse. "We'll talk about it later," I said. I didn't know what Rebecca had for me. But I knew one thing, whatever Grace left behind, she left it for a reason. My grandmother was a careful woman. Very careful. Let me tell you what $48,000 means when you're a nurse. It means 6 years of picking up every holiday shift nobody wanted. Christmas, Thanksgiving, New Year's Eve. It means eating leftovers from the break room instead of going out. It means driving a car with 210,000 miles on it because a monthly payment on a new one would slow the savings down. That money was supposed to be my way out. A down payment on a small place of my own. A life that didn't revolve around auto-pay transfers to a house where nobody thanked me. If I gave it to Amber's wedding, I'd be starting from zero at 27 with nothing to show for a decade of work. No safety net. No future. Just a pretty reception I helped pay for and a seat at the back of the church. But here's the thing that burned the most. It wasn't the money. It was the pattern. When I was 18, I applied for a nursing scholarship. Full tuition. I got accepted. The letter arrived in a white envelope addressed to me. I never saw it. I found out 2 years later by accident when a former teacher mentioned it at a grocery store. Didn't you take that scholarship, Maya? You were the top candidate. I went home and searched. Found the opened envelope in my father's desk drawer, shoved behind old tax forms. He'd read it. He never told me. When I confronted him, he didn't even flinch. You weren't ready, he said. You would have failed. I paid my own way through nursing school. Loans, night shifts at a diner, 3 years of sleeping 4 hours a night. Every time I built something, he found a way to take it. This time, I decided to stop handing him the hammer. In the Chin family, Richard was the oldest brother. That meant something. In our family, the oldest didn't just lead. He narrated. He decided who was generous and who was selfish, who was loyal and who was difficult. The rest followed because it was easier than fighting. My Uncle James was the only person who ever pushed back. He's Richard's younger brother, a carpenter. Quiet guy, hands like sandpaper, the kind of man who says 10 words where other people say 100. 5 years ago at Thanksgiving, James looked across the table and said, "Richard, you're too hard on that girl." That was it. One sentence. Richard didn't yell. He simply stopped inviting James to anything. Stopped returning his calls. Within 6 months, James was erased from every family gathering like he'd never existed. That's what I was facing. Not just my father. The entire architecture of a family built around his version of events. 2 days before the party, Diane started making calls. I know because I heard her from the hallway, on speakerphone, cycling through aunts and cousins with the same rehearsed script. Maya's been so difficult lately. She won't help with anything. Richard gives and she just takes. She called Aunt Karen, Cousin Hannah, even my father's old college friend. Planting seeds. Framing the story before I ever got a chance to tell mine. Then my phone rang. It was Aunt Karen. "Honey, what's going on? Your father says you've been giving them a hard time." I stood in my room, phone pressed to my ear, and realized the trial had already happened. The verdict was in and I hadn't even been allowed to testify. I was walking into that birthday dinner already convicted. The only question was whether I'd accept the sentence. The night before my birthday, I stood in the bathroom and looked at myself in the mirror for a long time. Dark circles under my eyes from a 54-hour work week. Hair pulled back in a knot I hadn't bothered to fix. My scrub still smelled like antiseptic. This is what a person looks like when they've been hollowed out slowly, I thought. Not by one event. By 1,000 small ones. 1,000 moments where someone said "you're not enough" without ever using those words. Diane's voice carried through the wall. She was on the phone again. I could hear the tiny echo of speakerphone from the master bedroom. She's always been jealous of Amber. You know how it is. Some kids just don't have it in them to be grateful. I pressed my ear to the wall. I couldn't help it. Richard's given her everything, Diane continued. A roof, food, stability. And she can't even do this one thing for her sister. Honestly, I don't know what Sarah would think. Sarah. My mother's name in Diane's mouth, used as a weapon. My hands went flat against the wall. I closed my eyes for a second. Just 1 second. I wanted to open that door and scream. Scream until the neighbors heard. Scream until someone in this house finally understood what it felt like to be me. But I didn't. Because screaming was what they expected. Screaming was what Diane had prepped 38 people to witness. The dramatic, ungrateful stepdaughter making a scene. I stepped back from the wall, sat on the edge of my bed. And I thought about something Grace used to say. Quiet strength, my darling girl. Let them shout. You just keep standing. So that's what I did. I picked out a dress for my birthday. And I stood. Saturday evening. The Vineyard, a mid-range Italian restaurant on the west side with exposed brick walls and warm pendant lighting. Richard had booked the private dining room. 38 people. I walked in wearing the only nice dress I owned. Navy blue, modest. I'd curled my hair, put on lipstick. For the first time in months, I wanted to feel like someone worth celebrating. The room buzzed with conversation. White tablecloths, candles and glass holders. A banner stretched across the back wall, Happy Birthday, Maya. Someone had ordered a cake. Chocolate, my favorite. For a moment, I let myself believe it was real. Then I noticed the seating. The main table, the one directly under the banner, had 5 chairs. Richard at the head, Diane to his right, Amber next to Diane, Marcus Sullivan, Amber's fiancé, beside her. And one empty seat for Richard's college friend. My name was on a place card at a smaller table near the kitchen door. At my own birthday dinner. I picked up the card and sat down without a word. People greeted me as they passed. Quick hugs. Happy birthday, sweetheart. But the conversations always drifted. Amber, show me that ring. When's the wedding? Diane, you must be thrilled. I watched from my table, sipping water, smiling when someone glanced my way. Then Richard stood. He tapped his glass with a butter knife. The room quieted. He picked up the small wireless microphone the restaurant had provided. He looked out at 38 faces. He smiled. Tonight is special, he began, not just because of Maya's birthday. My chest tightened. But because we have a very exciting announcement. He turned toward Amber, his whole face lit up. And I understood right then that this party had never been for me. Our beautiful Amber, Richard said into the microphone, is engaged. The room erupted. Applause, squeals, chairs scraped back as people stood to hug Amber. She rose from the main table, hand extended, diamond catching the pendant light like a tiny spotlight built just for her. For the next 10 minutes, my birthday evaporated. Aunt Karen clasped Amber's hand and examined the ring. Cousin Hannah took a photo for Instagram. Richard's college friend clapped Marcus on the back. Diane stood behind Amber, one hand on her daughter's shoulder, beaming like she'd just won something. No one looked at me. I sat at my table by the kitchen door. The cake with my name on it sat untouched at the end of the buffet. The candles hadn't been lit. Marcus caught my eye once. He was standing slightly apart from the circle around Amber, his jaw tight. He gave me a look I couldn't quite read. Not pity exactly. Something closer to recognition. Like he saw what was happening but didn't know what to do about it. Then the room settled. People returned to their seats. Richard stayed standing, microphone still in hand. "Now," he said, his voice shifted. Warmer. Practiced. He turned toward me. "Maya, honey, come here for a second." 38 people looked at me. I stood. Walked to the main table. My heels clicked against the tile floor. Richard put a hand on my shoulder. Firm. Performative. "Family takes care of family," he said to the room. "And now that Amber's big day is coming, we need to pull together." He looked directly at me. "Maya, we need to talk about the wedding budget. Not in private. Not later. Here. Now. In front of everyone." Exactly as Diane had planned. "Maya has been very responsible with her finances," Richard said, addressing the room like a keynote speaker. "She's been saving for years, and I know she'll want to help her sister have the wedding she deserves." He squeezed my shoulder. The pressure said, "Agree." I stood still. Diane leaned forward in her chair. She dabbed her eye with a napkin, a gesture so practiced it could have been choreographed. "It's what your mother would have wanted, Maya." The room went soft. A few people murmured. Someone whispered, "Oh, Sarah. My mother. My dead mother. Used to guilt me into writing a check in front of 38 witnesses." I felt the blood rise to my face. My pulse was so loud I was sure the people at the nearest table could hear it. "This is my birthday dinner," I said. My voice came out steady. "Quiet. Can we not do this here?" Richard's smile thinned. His hand dropped from my shoulder. "Another time?" He shook his head slowly. "You always say another time, Maya." "Not now. Never when it matters." His volume climbed. "Not shouting." Richard never shouted. He commanded. "I have given you a home. A family. 20 years of patience. And you can't do this one thing." The room was a held breath. Forks down. Napkin still. Aunt Karen stared at her plate. Cousin Hannah gripped her water glass. Amber pulled out her phone. Tilted the screen toward me. A tiny red dot blinked in the corner. Recording. I looked at the dot. I looked at Amber. Her thumb hovered over the screen. For 1 second, her hand trembled like she almost lowered it. She didn't. Richard stepped closer. His face was red. "Now, if you can't do this one thing for your family." He didn't finish. "Not yet." I spoke before he could finish. "I'm not giving away my savings, Dad." My voice didn't waver. "That money is for my future." The room shifted. Someone inhaled sharply near the back. I could feel 38 sets of eyes on my skin like heat lamps. Richard stopped moving. His jaw tightened. Something behind his eyes went flat. Like a switch being flipped. He stared at me for what felt like a full minute. It was probably 5 seconds. Then he said it. "I wish you were never born." Not screaming. Not whispering. Just stating it the way you'd read a line from a receipt. Factual. Final. The room didn't gasp. It froze. Sound left the space entirely. I could hear the muffled clink of dishes from the kitchen behind the wall. The instrumental music from the overhead speaker suddenly felt obscene. Like someone playing a flute at a car accident. Aunt Karen set her fork down very slowly. Diane didn't speak. She simply looked at Richard, then at me. And nodded. One small, certain nod. As if she'd been waiting for this sentence for years. Amber's phone was still pointed at my face. Her hand was shaking now. But she didn't lower it. Marcus, behind Amber, pushed his chair back from the table. Not standing. Just creating distance. His expression had gone tight, closed. Like a man recalculating something he'd already decided. I felt something crack inside my chest. Not break. Crack. Like ice on a pond in early spring. Quiet. Deep. The kind of fracture you can't see from the surface. I looked at my father. I looked at the room full of people who heard those words and chose silence. And I made a decision. I didn't cry. I picked up my napkin from the table. Folded it once, twice. Set it down neatly beside my untouched water glass. I looked around the room one more time. 38 people. Some stared at their plates. Some looked at Richard. A few looked at me. With what? Pity? Shock? I couldn't tell anymore. It didn't matter. Nobody spoke. I turned to the room and said the only thing I had left. Thank you all for coming to my birthday. Then I picked up my bag from the back of my chair, walked across the dining room, and pushed through the door. The night air hit me like cold water. I made it to my car in the parking lot before my hands started shaking. I sat behind the wheel for 3 minutes, gripping it, breathing through my nose like I was coaching a patient through a panic episode. Then I reached for my phone. One contact. One call. Rebecca Morrison picked up on the first ring at 10:20 on a Saturday night. Rebecca, I said. I want to come in tomorrow. I'm ready. A pause. Then her voice, calm, unsurprised, like she'd been keeping a seat warm. I'll have everything prepared, Maya. 9 a.m. I hung up. I didn't know what everything meant yet. I didn't know what Grace had left behind or why Rebecca had been waiting for my call for 2 years. All I knew was that my grandmother had never done anything without a reason. She was deliberate about her recipes, her garden, her Sunday phone calls. She would have been deliberate about this too. I turned the key in the ignition and pulled out of the parking lot. I didn't look at the restaurant in the rearview mirror. Not once. 6:30 a.m. The house was silent. I'd packed the night before. One suitcase, one duffel bag. Only things that were mine. Clothes, my nursing license in its frame, a photo of Grace and me at the state fair when I was 11. I left everything else. I carried the bags downstairs in 2 trips, stepping over the creaky 3rd step by habit. No one stirred. Richard's snoring rumbled from behind the master bedroom door. Diane's sleep mask was probably still on. At the kitchen table, I sat down and opened my laptop. 15 minutes of precise, quiet work. First, I transferred my savings to a new account at a different bank. Every cent moved. Second, I called the credit card company's automated line and canceled the supplementary card. Effective immediately. Third, I confirmed the lease on a studio apartment 7 miles across town. I toured it the previous week on my lunch break without telling anyone. 420 square feet. Clean. Mine. Before I left, I placed a single envelope on the kitchen counter. Inside, 4 years of bank statements. Every mortgage payment, every insurance premium, every utility bill, every tax installment. Highlighted. Totaled. Dated. $127,000. All from my account. All for this house. No letter. No explanation. No, I told you so. Just numbers. I zipped my jacket, picked up my bags, and walked to the front door. The hallway was still dark. The house smelled like Diane's lavender diffuser and old carpet. I'd lived here for 20 years. I'd paid for it for 4. I turned the knob, stepped outside, and pulled the door shut behind me. It clicked. Soft. Final. I loaded the car and drove east into a sky that was just beginning to turn pink. I did not come back. Here's what I learned later, pieced together from Uncle James and Cousin Hannah. Sunday morning. Diane walked into the kitchen around 9. She noticed the envelope on the counter but pushed it aside to make coffee. She climbed the stairs to tell me breakfast was ready. Not out of kindness. Out of habit. My room was empty. Closet cleared. Bed stripped to the mattress. She called Richard. Her voice was flat. Almost amused. She actually left. Richard came upstairs, looked at the bare room, shrugged. Good. Let her sulk. She'll be back by Friday. He went downstairs and turned on the television. Amber woke up next. She reached for her phone and opened the banking app. The supplementary credit card was declined. Frozen. Cancelled. She called me. Voicemail. Called again. Voicemail. She walked into the living room, phone in hand. My card's not working. Did Maya do something? Richard glanced at her. She's throwing a tantrum. It'll pass. Diane found the envelope on the counter again. She picked it up, weighed it in her hand, then set it back down. Unopened. Probably some dramatic goodbye letter, she said. I'm not giving her the satisfaction. By Monday afternoon, Richard had called me 4 times. Each time, voicemail. He left one message. Maya, this is childish. Call me back. By Wednesday, silence from my end. Not a single text, email, or returned call. Richard told Aunt Karen I was going through a phase. He told his college friend I was being emotional about the birthday thing. And the envelope sat on the kitchen counter untouched. A time bomb no one bothered to open. Day 5. The electric company sent an automated notice. Past due. Richard called their customer service line, gave his name, asked for the account details. I'm sorry, sir. The account is registered to Maya Chen. He blinked. That's my daughter. I live at this address. We can only discuss account details with the registered holder. He hung up. Stared at the phone. Day 7. A letter from the bank. Not a bill. A formal notice. Mortgage payment overdue. He tore open the envelope standing at the mailbox. The name on the mortgage, Maya E. Chen. Richard read it twice. Then he carried it inside and dropped it on the kitchen table in front of Diane. What the hell is this? Diane picked it up. Her eyes scanned the page. Her mouth opened. Closed. That's impossible. This is our house. That's what I said. Richard went to the filing cabinet in the hallway closet, the one he hadn't opened in years. He pulled folders. Tax returns, old pay stubs, insurance papers. He searched for a deed, a title, anything with his name on it. Nothing. Not a single document tied him to the house. Then Diane remembered the envelope. She walked back to the kitchen counter. The white envelope was still there, now with a coffee ring on one corner. She tore it open. Pages. Dozens of pages. Bank statements going back 4 years. Each one highlighted. Each one showing autopay withdrawals from my checking account. Mortgage, electric, water, insurance, tax. Total, $127,000. Diane sat down. She didn't speak for a long time. Richard stood behind her, reading over her shoulder. His face had gone gray. But they still didn't know the worst part. The house wasn't just in my name because of payments. It had never been in Richard's name. Not once. Richard did what Richard always did when he lost control. He picked up the phone and started narrating. Within 24 hours, half the family had heard his version. Maya walked out. Maya canceled the credit card. Maya stopped paying bills. She's punishing us because she didn't get enough attention at her birthday. Some people believed him. They always had. But something was different this time. Some people remembered that night at the vineyard. They remembered Richard's face when he said those words. They remembered the silence that followed. And they remembered that not a single person in that room, including themselves, had stood up. 2 weeks after I left, Richard called a family meeting. He chose the community center attached to our church. A beige room with folding chairs, buzzing overhead lights, and a coffee urn that was always either empty or burned. About 30 people came. Aunts, uncles, cousins. Some I hadn't seen since Grace's funeral. Richard stood at the front like he was conducting a town hall. Diane sat in the first row, tissue in hand. Amber sat beside her, arms folded, phone face down on her lap for once. I asked everyone here, Richard began, because we have a family situation that needs to be addressed. He launched into his version. Maya abandoned the family. Maya canceled the credit card. Maya stopped paying the bills. Maya is punishing all of us because of a misunderstanding at dinner. Diane dabbed her eyes on cue. A few people nodded. A few shifted uncomfortably. Aunt Karen kept her eyes on the floor. Richard built to his closing argument. All I'm asking is that someone talk sense into her. She's hurting this family. That's when Uncle James stood up. He'd been sitting in the back row. Quiet. Arms on his knees. No one had expected him to come. Richard certainly hadn't invited him. But James had heard about the meeting through Cousin Hannah, and he drove 45 minutes to be there. Richard, James said. His voice was level. Carpenter steady. Before you say anything else, did you invite Rebecca Morrison? Richard frowned. Who? Why would I? The side door opened. Rebecca Morrison stepped in. 63 years old, gray blazer, reading glasses on a chain around her neck, a leather portfolio under her arm. She nodded once at Richard. Mr. Chen, I'm here on behalf of your daughter. She paused. And your mother. The room went dead silent. Rebecca didn't rush. She set her portfolio on the folding table at the front of the room, opened it, and removed a single document in a clear plastic sleeve. My name is Rebecca Morrison. I'm an estate and real estate attorney. I was Grace Chen's legal counsel for 23 years and her friend for longer than that. She placed the document flat on the table. 2 years before her passing, Grace Chen executed a legal transfer of the property at 815 Oakmont Drive to her granddaughter, Maya Eleanor Chen. The transfer was notarized, recorded with the county, and is fully binding. She slid the document forward. The deed. Clear as daylight. Richard stared at it. His face didn't move. That's impossible, he said. That is my house. Rebecca looked at him over her reading glasses. Your name has never been on the deed, Mr. Chen. Your mother purchased the home in 1989. She chose who would inherit it. The room erupted in murmurs. Chairs creaked. Someone whispered, "Oh my God." Diane shot to her feet. That can't be right. We've lived there for. You've lived there as permitted occupants, Rebecca said. Not as owners. Richard's hands gripped the edge of his chair. My mother would never do this behind my back. James stood again. He'd been quiet until now. She did, Richard. His voice was low but firm. I was there. I witnessed the signing. The room turned to James. 30 faces recalculating. Richard stared at his brother. You knew. Mom asked me to be there. She said you'd understand eventually. James swallowed. She also said you probably wouldn't. Richard opened his mouth. Nothing came out. Rebecca calmly reached into her portfolio for the next set of documents. In addition, she continued, unclipping a thick stack of highlighted pages. Over the past 4 years, Maya Chen has personally paid the full mortgage, homeowner's insurance, property tax, and all utilities for the property at 815 Oakmont Drive. She spread the statements across the table like a dealer laying out cards. Mortgage, $1,400 per month. Insurance, $390 quarterly. Property tax, $4,000 annually. Utilities averaging $570 per month. She adjusted her glasses. Total personal expenditure, approximately $127,000. All documented. All from Maya's individual checking account. The room didn't erupt this time. It sank. The kind of silence where you can hear someone swallow 3 rows back. Aunt Karen, the woman who had called me to ask why I was giving my father a hard time, pressed her hand over her mouth. Cousin Hannah stared at the table. Her eyes were wet. An uncle near the back leaned forward. She paid for the whole house? This whole time? She did, Rebecca said. And during that same period, a supplementary credit card linked to Maya's account was used for personal purchases by other household members. Those charges were also paid by Maya. Diane's face went white. Not pink with embarrassment. White. Drained. She lived there for free, Diane blurted. That was her contribution to the family. Room and board. Rebecca looked at Diane, not unkindly, but without a trace of indulgence. Mrs. Chen, Maya was paying the mortgage on a property she legally owns. If anything, she was subsidizing your housing. Someone in the back row let out a breath that was almost a laugh. Richard hadn't moved. He sat with both hands on his knees, staring at the bank statements from 4 feet away. As if looking at them too closely might make them more real. These were numbers. Not opinions. Numbers don't take sides. Aunt Karen stood first. She was 60, 5'2", and had never raised her voice at a family gathering in her life. She looked at Richard the way you look at someone you're seeing clearly for the first time. Richard, she said, you stood in that restaurant and told that girl you wished she was never born. The girl who paid for your roof. Richard didn't answer. Cousin Hannah spoke next, her voice cracking. I called her. I called Maya and accused her of being selfish. She didn't even defend herself. She just asked if I knew what you said. Rebecca closed her portfolio with one smooth motion. I was asked to present a file. The file has been presented. She nodded once. Good evening. She walked out the side door. No drama. No final word. Just a woman who had done exactly what she came to do. 2 days after the family meeting, Rebecca sent a formal letter to Richard and Diane. 60-day notice to vacate the property at 815 Oakmont Drive. It was typed on firm letterhead, sent certified mail. Every line was legally precise, procedurally clean, and completely within my rights as the property owner. I didn't send it myself. I didn't attach a personal note. Rebecca handled it the way she handled everything, correctly. That night, Richard called me 19 times. I listened to the voicemails the next morning in order, like chapters of a book I already knew the ending to. Calls 1 through 10 were angry. You think this is funny? This is my family's house. Calls 11 through 15 shifted. Harder to listen to. The anger started to crack, and underneath it was something thinner. Desperation. Maya, we can talk about this. Just tell Rebecca to pull the letter back. I'll look for work. I'll apologize. Is that what you want? Call 16 was silence. 28 seconds of breathing. Then he hung up. Call 17. The last one. Richard's voice, stripped of everything. No authority. No performance. Maya, please. Where are we supposed to go? I sat on the edge of my bed in my studio apartment, morning light through the window, a mug of coffee going cold on the nightstand. I played that last voicemail twice. I didn't feel victory. I didn't feel satisfaction or vindication or any of the things people think you're supposed to feel when the person who hurt you finally breaks. I felt something quieter. Like setting down a bag I'd been carrying for 20 years and realizing how badly my shoulders ached. I saved the voicemail, closed my phone, and went to work. I had a 12-hour shift. Patients needed me. That hadn't changed. 3 months later, my apartment is 420 square feet. The hot water takes 90 seconds to warm up. The walls are thin enough that I can hear my neighbor's cat meowing at 5 in the morning. It's mine. I still work at the hospital. Still take night shifts. Still eat leftovers in the break room on Tuesdays. But when I check my bank account now, the number is mine. Every dollar earned, every dollar spent, accounted for on my terms. Uncle James comes by every Sunday. He brings coffee from the place on Maple Street and sits on my second-hand couch and tells me about whatever he's building in his shop that week. We don't talk about Richard much. We don't need to. Cousin Hannah has become something I didn't expect. A real friend. She texts me recipes. She showed up with a houseplant last month and a card that said, "For your new beginning." It sits on the windowsill next to Grace's photo. That photo, Grace and me at the state fair this summer I turned 11, is hanging on the wall across from my bed. Next to it, my nursing license, framed. 2 things I earned. 2 things no one can take. Richard sent a Christmas card last week. No apology inside. No letter. No, I told you so. Just my name on the front, written in his handwriting. Maya. That's all. Just my name. Like he was practicing saying it without flinching. I'm not telling you this story so you'll feel sorry for me. I'm telling you because maybe you're sitting somewhere right now in a house you pay for but don't feel welcome in, next to people who take everything you give and call it not enough, staring at a phone full of messages from someone who hurt you and wants you to pretend it didn't happen. I've been there. I know what that silence sounds like from the inside. Leaving wasn't revenge. I know some people will call it that. They'll say I was cold. They'll say I should have tried harder, talked it out, given another chance, another year, another $100,000 of patience. But leaving was the first time I chose myself. And I don't think that's cold. I think it's the warmest thing I've ever done. You don't need someone's permission to protect your own life. You don't need the person who hurt you to agree that it was wrong before you're allowed to walk away. You don't need to scream or argue or build a case. Sometimes you just fold the napkin, stand up, and go. My grandmother taught me that. Not in words. In the way she lived. She loved fiercely and she planned carefully. And when she saw something wrong, she didn't make a speech. She made a move. Quiet strength. If this story touched something in you, I want you to know you're not alone. And you don't have to stay in a room where no one sees you just because it's the only room you've ever known. There are doors. And they're yours to open. If you made it this far, thank you. Drop a comment and let me know your thoughts. And if you want to hear more stories like this, check the description below.